I just really connected to the main character because of her struggle with living in between two worlds. Whatever experience a person has while simultaneously being black,
right,
that's a part of the
that's
black
part of the
experience.
And we're angry, and we haven't yet solved what we're gonna do about this issue. Hi, welcome back to Gotta Be Me podcast. We're so happy to be back with you again after our winter break, Christmas break. Seems like it's been a long time since we've podcasted.
Yeah, it has.
I mean, when you're doing it every week and then all of a sudden you take like, how long has it been? 3 weeks? 2 weeks? We got sick. We had pneumonia and everything. It was horrible. But anyway, we're back. We're ready to go. And we're excited about our topic for today. We're always excited about our topic for today. Oh, yeah, and we're our hosts. I'm Sophia Benyon, if you've never been here before. And this is my cousin, Paya Benyon.
And do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, got all that out of the way now. But we decided that for this podcast and the next few that we do, just me and Peyton, we want to talk about some books that have really affected us in our lives. And today is like a book that's a little more fun. It's not quite as heavy as some of the other ones, although it did, like I would say it changed our lives, right?
I think it was pretty heavy to me when I read it.
Right. Even though it's like, it might even be considered more of like a teenager's book or something. Yeah, it was still pretty heavy. Anyway, that book is The Hate U Give by Angela Thomas. You almost made me say the wrong name.
You did say it. It's Angie Thomas. I did.
See, you messed me up. Angie Thomas. They by Angie Thomas. What was the year she wrote it?
So Angie Thomas wrote this book in 2017. So it's kind of an old book.
It's kind of old by now, right?
Almost 10 years.
And I mean, we read it when we were younger.
Yes. I read it when I was probably 16 or so. Okay. 15 or 16. Right around there.
And then I got it from you. Yeah, I'd seen it on the plane. I saw like the trailer for the movie or something, and I was like, I want to know what that's about. Like, it looked really interesting.
Yeah.
And then you were like, I got the book, and I was like, give it to me. I stayed up all night for this one. I pulled an all-nighter for this one.
Yeah. So we were just talking about books that we thought were kind of life-changing for us. And I had picked this book because it really affected me in my younger years, because I would say we grew up pretty sheltered.
Absolutely.
Actually extremely sheltered.
Extremely sheltered.
Which I'm thankful for. It protected us from a lot of things that weren't good and a lot of evil things. But I think when I read this book, I immediately connected to the main character, and it said something that I hadn't really heard because of my sheltered life. And that was the thing that kind of connected me to this book. Like, this is the book I take everywhere with me. Like, if I'm moving somewhere, I gotta have this book. It's like a friend, a family member, you know. And I just really connected to the main character because of her struggle with living in between two worlds.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a main part of the story, but it's definitely one of the main parts.
It's an important part, for sure.
How she felt at school and how she felt at home.
Right.
And just trying to flip the switch between those two worlds. And being a mixed child, I always felt like, I read it and I was like, yes, yes, I know about that.
When I'm with my mom's family or with my dad's family.
Right. And when she was at school, she would feel like, I'm not, you know, I don't fit in with these bougie people, you know what I mean? And then when she went back home, you know, she hadn't spent a lot of time with them either.
She still felt
and
like,
she felt
I don't
like,
fit in here
I'm not
either,
black
right?
enough. And I think a lot of times, in the black community, we see the black experience as something that's so one-dimensional.
Right. And that's
like,
so
if
not
it's
true.
not this way, it's not the black experience.
Right.
You know, you can't keep your black card if you don't know this, if you don't do this or whatever, you know? And really, whatever experience a person has while simultaneously being black, that's a part of the black experience,
absolutely.
Right? And so we all have a black experience. It might not all look the same, and it's not all stereotypical.
Right.
And I think that was all an interesting dynamic for me. What was
when you
part
read it
of the book that sticks out to you?
Well, when I read the book, like I said, I stayed up all night. I had a limited time. Like, you were leaving the next day, and you were like, well, then you better finish it. And I was like, okay. And I was, like, reading it as fast as I could. And I got really into the story, you know, the storyline. You know, at the beginning, you barely get to meet her friend, and then he gets shot right away. And to me, it made everything more real. Like, a couple years before, like 2 or 3 years before, we had gone to Ferguson after the Michael Brown shooting. And just putting it in a story form like this just makes that pop out to you, like
Right.
how tragic those things are, you know, and it made it more real to me, and you know, getting to know the persons and the personalities and everything. And then, like you said too, that part about being between two worlds but never feeling like you definitely fit in either
Belonged in
one
one.
exactly. I get that totally. But I think the biggest thing for me was at the end of the book, how the book ends. Like, they're, you know, they get really angry because of the ruling. Like, the police gets off, right? Like, he doesn't get in trouble.
Right.
And for shooting this boy that had a brush,
Right.
right? And at the end of the book, they're protesting, right?
Right.
And does she like throw a grenade or something?
There was
Not a grenade,
tear
but like a
gas
tear
thing,
gas
and
thing.
she
Yeah,
kicked it back at the
grenade,
police.
so
Right.
dramatic. Yeah, no, a tear gas thing. But how it ended for me, to me, was so unsettling. I was like, okay, but we didn't find the answer. And I was frustrated with the book. Peyton was like, did you like it? And I was like, they didn't even, the book doesn't even end with the solution. And so what's the, almost with the attitude of like, what's the book worth because it's not giving us a solution. But I read it again recently, like maybe like a year or so ago, or maybe it was more like 2 years. And I'm so glad I did because I realized that's exactly the value of the book. That it shows, we don't know. We haven't found an answer yet. We're just out here in the streets and we're angry and we haven't yet solved what we're gonna do about this issue. We haven't, you know, there's not a general, you know, thing that we've come to like, okay, well, if we do this, if we follow this plan, no. We're still protesting. We're still angry. And since she wrote this, I mean, George Floyd has happened. So many more tragic incidents have happened. I mean, we could run down the list since this book has come out, since people have known about this. And it's just obvious that we haven't found an answer. And to me, that's the value of how she ends the book. Like, yes, we're at this point, as a nation, as a people, we're just frustrated.
Right.
We don't have answers yet. We don't have solutions yet. We're just like, what are we gonna do about this killing of our innocent people that you know, and the prejudice
and the book portrays that
exactly.
Well. I do remember. I knew about police brutality before this. I knew about it because my mom was always pretty freaked out about it. Like, when we would get pulled over, she would threaten us within an inch of our lives. Like, don't you move, don't you say a word, don't you do a thing. And she would be freaking out. And my dad, like, don't move, to keep your hands on the wheel. She would, like, be really stressed about it. So we grew up with that. And then, like, reading this book and understanding it in a bigger context was just like,
not gonna lie, I think this book made me a little more nervous than I was before. I mean, like, obviously getting pulled over police is never like just a fun occasion. But after I read this book, I was even more like, oh, Dad, be careful. Yeah, right. I didn't like it.
Other parts of the book that stuck out to me. Oh, I know. I was curious about this. So you know how Haley is in the book?
Yeah.
The whole time through, right? And it's constantly like tumultuous, right? Because Star is kind of coming through this awakening. You know, she's 16. Right, around that age, and she's like dealing with this, and she has this friend who's kind of not on board with her, who's not getting the same awakening as her. You know, everyone comes to it at a different point, but understands like, okay, racism is real.
Right.
And this has been happening for way longer than I can even imagine being alive, before my grandparents, before my great-grandparents.
And believe it or not, it's still happening.
It's still happening. And you kind of come to that realization and that awakening as you get older. And then I'm curious if you've ever felt that as you came through that awakening, if there were any Haleys that you felt were like kind of drew back from you, like, what is this? I don't know this about you. I don't understand this.
I have to say there totally was. And I thought it's kind of interesting in the book, and I don't say this to be offensive at all, but it sometimes kind of happens like this. Maya, her other friend, right? She was a minority too. And at first she was like, what happened to you? But she got it. It made sense because guess what?
Because she had to deal with it.
She had to deal with weird comments too and people saying annoying things. And I'm telling you, there's like, you grow up with some friends that they literally don't have to deal with it.
They never
and
had to
because
think
we
about
were
it.
sheltered, there was a long time that we didn't have to deal with it either. But at some point, as a Black person, you're going to have to deal with being Black and what that means. You're going to come across something.
America will force you to deal with it.
You have to deal with it. But you have friends that don't ever have to deal with that issue. And then when all of a sudden, when you all of a sudden have to deal with it, you know, it kind of flips you out. You're kind of like, what
and
is
you're really
this?
sensitive about it. Just
All of
like
a
Star
sudden,
Wars, you're like, okay, everything, every comment is like, was that?
Yeah,
What'd you say?
Exactly.
But
What do you mean by that?
You know,
I remember like growing up, you know, and when my friends would be like, "Can I touch your hair?" Like I never cared. I was just like, "I touch my hair," like whatever. And then I remember when like I'd had that like awakening, and all of a sudden, I could not stand it when people asked to touch my hair. I was like it made me angry, and it just made me like it made me want to cry actually and run. Like I couldn't. I was so sensitive to it, and so yeah, I definitely think like some people, because they haven't had to deal with it, they're not forced to deal with it. It takes them longer to understand it.
Absolutely. And yeah, I've definitely experienced that as well. Like friends are just kind of like, okay,
I don't know what happened to you.
What's wrong with her? I don't know why she was so sensitive about that. And you're like, you don't understand.
Yeah, totally.
You're kind of like that.
So I would definitely say that The Hate U Give was a big part of like bringing us to that awakening. Obviously, we could have never come to that awakening without, you know, the leaders of the church helping us to understand. But this was like
have a good perspective.
Absolutely, but this was like a great tool along the way to, you know, I mean, stories are a great tool. It teaches you about
Sticks
history,
in your head a lot better,
right? And you feel a connection to the people. I do want to say that I think this book is like 100% better than the movie, right?
Yes, I hate the movie.
You hate it
so much. Yeah, I hate it.
Okay, I don't hate the movie
because it literally ends differently than this book ends.
True.
Like Sakani has a gun. I was like, no, Sakani would have never done something like that. That doesn't even make sense in the whole context of the story. I was also very angry that Chris did not look how he was supposed to look. The book said he had blue eyes. He did not have blue eyes in the movie.
That doesn't make the movie horrible. That doesn't make the movie horrible.
Okay, I was upset, and it left out like some of my favorite parts of the book.
It did leave out some of my favorite parts. I'm gonna say I don't hate the movie, but I do think the book is like 100% better.
100%
if you've only seen the movie, you should definitely see. And I feel like you know the people better after the book. Well, you spend a lot more hours with the book, right, than you spend with the movie. Anyway, that's all we have for you today. We'll see you next time with another book, hopefully. You know what time it is. Peace, love, and hair grease.